Like the Spanish, French, and Virginians, the Puritans justified their migration to America by their desire to convert indigenous people to Christianity. However, their actual efforts in this mission were limited. Unlike the Spanish and French, who made more systematic efforts to convert Native Americans, the Puritans were primarily focused on establishing their own religious community rather than engaging extensively in missionary work. The Puritans arrived in America with the intention of creating a model Christian society which they hoped would be a beacon of religious purity and virtue. Governor John Winthrop famously described their mission as creating a city upon a hill, a metaphor for their vision of a godly society that would serve as an example to the rest of the world. Despite these ideals, the Puritans' approach to Native Americans was often marked by distrust and hostility. They saw the indigenous peoples as savage and believed that their conversion to Christianity was less important than their own survival and the establishment of their colony. This attitude was evident in statesmen such as Winthrop's relief when he learned that a smallpox epidemic had severely weakened the local indigenous population, which he saw as a sign of divine favor for the colony. One notable exception to the general lack of missionary zeal among the Puritans was Reverend John Eliot, who worked diligently to convert Native Americans in Massachusetts. Eliot, who arrived in the colony in 1631, made significant efforts to spread Christianity among the indigenous population. By mid-1670s, he had established around 14 praying towns, where approximately 1,100 Native Americans lived under Puritan influence. Eliot's mission was driven by a genuine belief in the need to save souls and convert Native Americans to Christianity. However, his efforts were largely limited to those who had already been significantly affected by European diseases and colonial encroachment. Despite these efforts, many Puritans still viewed the indigenous peoples as obstacles to their colonial ambitions and hoped that they would eventually disappear, much like the Old Testament nations displaced by the Israelites. One important event that altered the political dynamics between the Native Americans and the settlers was the Pequot War. We will now talk about that. The Pequot War of 1637 was a devastating conflict that arose from the escalating tensions between the Pequot tribe and the English settlers. The Pequot, who inhabited the region around the Connecticut River, had been involved in territorial disputes with neighboring tribes, which were further complicated by the presence of English settlers. The immediate cause of the war was an attack on the frontier town of Wethersfield by Pequot warriors. In response, Connecticut militias launched a brutal offensive against the Pequot. In May 1637, the English forces, aided by their Native American allies, surrounded the Pequot's main village at Mystic. The English set the village on fire and killed many of the Pequot inhabitants, including women and children, as they attempted to escape. The slaughter at Mystic was a turning point in the war. Over the following months, Massachusetts, Plymouth, and Connecticut militias continued their campaign against the Pequot, capturing and enslaving many of the survivors. The war resulted in the near destruction of the Pequot nation and consolidation of English control over the region. The Pequot War had a profound implication for the colonies. It demonstrated the brutal reality of colonial expansion and the willingness of English settlers to use violence to achieve their goals. The colonist victory in the war was seen as a sign of divine favor and justification for their territorial claims, further entrenching their belief in the right to dominate the land and its people. The Pequot War officially ended with the Treaty of Hartford in 1638. The treaty was negotiated between the English and the surviving Pequot leaders. The terms of the treaty were harsh and intended to ensure that the Pequot would not be a threat to the English settlers in the future. The Treaty of Hartford required the surviving Pequot to disband as a tribe and surrender their lands to the English. The Pequot were also required to renounce their identity and become subject to the authority of the English and their allies. The treaty effectively dissolved the Pequot tribe and scattered its members among other tribes and English settlements. The Treaty of Hartford marked the end of Pequot War and the beginning of a new phase in the relationship between the English settlers and Native Americans. The Pequot, once a powerful and influential tribe, were reduced to a fragmented and weakened group. The treaty set a precedent for how the English would handle defeated tribes in the future, often using treaties and alliances to consolidate their control over indigenous land. The relationship between settlers and the Native Americans declined further and resulted in the Metacom's War. Let's now talk about that. Metacom's War, also known as King Philip's War, was a more extensive and devastating conflict that erupted in 1675. The war was named after Metacom, the chief of the Wampanoag tribe, who was also known to the English as King Philip. The conflict was sparked by growing tensions between the English settlers and the Native American tribes in southern New England. By early 1670s, relations between the Wampanoag and the English settlers had deteriorated significantly. Metacom, who had succeeded his father Massasoit as the chief, was increasingly frustrated by the encroachment of English settlers on Wampanoag land. The situation was further inflamed when Metacom sold land to the colony of Rhode Island, a move that angered the Plymouth colony. A notable aspect of this tension was the role of Christian Indians. Some Native Americans who converted to Christianity lived in praying towns established by the English. These individuals found themselves caught between two worlds. They were distrusted both by their fellow Native Americans and by English settlers. The situation contributed to the overall instability in the region. Additionally, the English imposed various legal and economic pressures on Native Americans. English laws and courts often disadvantaged Native Americans in disputes with settlers. Moreover, fines and penalties were levied for violations of colonial laws, further deepening the divide between the two groups. The immediate causes of Metacom's War, also known as King Philip's War, stemmed from a series of escalating incidents. One crucial event was the death of John Sassamon in 1675. Sassamon, a Christian Indian and a trusted advisor to Metacom, was found dead under suspicious circumstances. His death, widely believed to be a murder, was interpreted as a sign of Metacom's impending actions against the English. In response, the English colonial authorities arrested and executed 3 Wampanoag men for Sassamon's murder, which inflamed tensions further. Shortly after these executions, the conflict escalated dramatically when Wampanoag warriors attacked the town of Swansea in Plymouth colony. This attack marked the beginning of Metacom's War and set off a series of violent confrontations between Native Americans and English settlers throughout New England. In the early stages of Metacom's War, Native American forces experienced several victories. Metacom, along with his allies, launched coordinated attacks on English settlements across New England. These guerrilla-style attacks were swift and devastating, resulting in significant destruction of property and loss of life. Towns such as Lancaster, Brookfield, and Deerfield were heavily affected by these raids. The early successes of Metacom's forces spread fear and panic among the English settlers, many of whom were forced to abandon their homes and seek refuge in fortified towns. The attacks also disrupted trade and communication, leading to food shortages and additional hardships for the settlers. The turning point in Metacom's War occurred with the Great Swamp Fight in December 1675. This crucial battle involved a surprise attack by English colonial forces along with their Native American allies on a large Narragansett fort located in a swamp in present-day South Kingston, Rhode Island. The fort, which had become a refuge for Narragansett men, women, and children during the winter, was subjected to a brutal assault. The English forces set fire to the fort, resulting in heavy casualties on both sides. Despite fierce resistance, the Narragansetts were ultimately overwhelmed. The Great Swamp Fight dealt a devastating blow to the Native American forces, significantly weakening Metacom's alliance and marking the beginning of the decline in Native American resistance. Following the Great Swamp Fight, the war began to turn in favor of the English settlers. The Native American forces, now weakened and divided, struggled to maintain their resistance. Attrition and starvation took a heavy toll, exacerbated by shortages of food, ammunition, and other supplies, and the harsh winter of 1675-1676. The loss of allies further weakened Metacom's position. Some tribes sought peace with the English, and the Mohawks, part of the Iroquois Confederacy, aligned with the English and attacked Metacom's forces. The final blow came in August 1676, when Metacom was tracked down and killed by English forces near Mount Hope in present-day Bristol, Rhode Island. His death effectively ended the war, and the remaining Native American resistance collapsed soon afterward. To mark their victory, the English mutilated Metacom's body and displayed his head on a pike in Plymouth Colony. Now we will talk about one of the most infamous events in American history, the Salem witch trials. These trials represent a dark period where fear, religious zeal, and social tensions collided, leading to tragic outcomes in the late 17th century New England. To truly understand the Salem witch trials, we must first explore the Puritan worldview, which was steeped in a deep fear of devil and guided by a strict moral code. The Salem witch trials cannot be separated from the religious and social context of the time. The Puritans, who settled in New England, were a religious group that believed they were chosen by God to build a city upon a hill that would serve as an example to the world. Their lives were governed by a strict interpretation of the Bible, and they saw the devil as a constant active threat. This intense religious fervor created a community that was highly suspicious of anything that deviated from their norms. Central to Puritan belief was covenant theology, which held that the entire community had a divine contract with God. If one person sinned, it could bring down God's wrath on everyone. This belief created a culture of fear and vigilance, where any misfortune, be it a poor harvest or an illness, could be interpreted as a sign that someone had broken the covenant. Women, in particular, were seen as more susceptible to the devil's temptations, making them prime targets for accusations of witchcraft. Beyond the religious and social context, political and economic factors also played a significant role in the Salem witch trials. During this period, the Massachusetts Bay Colony was experiencing political instability due to changes in its charter. The uncertainty and anxiety created by this political turmoil made the community even more prone to fear. At the same time, the colony was engaged in ongoing conflicts with Native American tribes, often referred to as frontier wars. These wars were brutal, and many Puritans saw them as a punishment from God or as a result of the devil's influence. The constant threat of attack heightened the community's sense of paranoia. Economic strains such as crop failures and diseases added to the sense of doom, and these were often interpreted as signs of divine disfavor. In this environment, it was easy for fear to take hold and for people to start looking for scapegoats. Now we will discuss a theory about Salem witch trials involving ergot, a fungus that infects grains like rye. This theory might explain some of the strange behaviors seen during the trials. Ergot is a fungus that grows on rye and other grains. It produces chemicals that can cause hallucinations, convulsions, and burning sensation. Historically, ergotism has been linked to mass hysteria and odd behaviors. In 1976, historian Linda Corporale suggested that ergotism could explain the symptoms of the girls in Salem, like convulsions and hallucinations. She believed that ergot-infected rye, due to Salem's cool and damp climate, might have caused these symptoms. Recent studies support this theory. Research has found traces of ergot in old grain samples from Salem, and historical records show conditions that could have led to ergot contamination. The Salem witch trials highlight how fear, religious fervor, political issues, and environmental factors can create a climate of hysteria. Understanding the role of ergot helps us see how multiple factors can contribute to historical events. The witch trials began in early 1692 in the household of Reverend Samuel Parris in Salem village. His daughter, Betty Parris, and niece, Abigail Williams, began exhibiting strange behaviors such as fits and contortions, which they claimed were caused by witchcraft. Under pressure, they accused 3 women of bewitching them: Tituba, a slave in the Parris household; Sarah Good, a homeless beggar; and Sarah Osborne, an elderly woman who had not attended church regularly. These initial accusations set off a chain reaction. As fear and hysteria spread throughout the community, more and more people were accused of witchcraft. The trials quickly escalated, and even well-respected members of the community were being accused. Personal grudges, property disputes, and social tensions often fueled these accusations, as people saw an opportunity to settle scores under the guise of rooting out witches. Several key figures stand out in the trial. Tituba, the first to confess to witchcraft, did so under pressure. Her confession, which included fantastical stories of witchcraft, only served to escalate the panic. Bridget Bishop was the first person to be executed in the trials. Her outspoken nature and the fact that she did not conform to the expected behavior of a Puritan woman made her an easy target. Giles Corey, another notable figure, refused to enter a plea when he was accused. As a result, he was pressed to death under heavy stones, a brutal method meant to force him to plead. His death became a symbol of the tragic consequences of the trial. The Salem witch trial are often seen as the result of a perfect storm of fear, religion, and social tension. The psychological impact of the frontier war likely played a significant role in heightening the sense of fear and paranoia in the community. The trials also reflect the rigid social order of Puritan society, where deviation from norms was not tolerated and could result in severe consequences. The end of trials came in 1693, largely because the hysteria had spiraled out of control and people began to realize that innocent lives were being lost. Many of those involved in trials, including judges and ministers, later expressed regret for their actions. The Salem witch trials have since become a cautionary tale about the dangers of mass hysteria, the misuse of power, and the consequences of allowing fear to override reason. As we move forward, we will explore how Salem witch trials have been interpreted and remembered over the centuries. This event continues to serve as a powerful reminder of the importance of due process and the dangers of letting fear drive justice.